Perhaps one of the most singularly spiritually athletic and endearingly fascinating occult rituals of the contemporary period is the Abramelin Rite. Made famous by Aleister Crowley and even the subject of a fantastic contemporary film, A Dark Song, the Abramelin Ritual is as famous, frankly, as it is pretty misunderstood. Now, I've done an entire episode on the Abramelin itself, but to just rehearse it a bit so you get some familiarity, it's to be found in the third book of Abramelin and details an elaborate 18-month ceremonial operation involving a progressively intensive cycle of prayer, anointing with the famous Abramelin oil, fasting and abstinence, by which one eventually receives communion with what the text refers to as one's holy guardian angel. This is a core component built into, for instance, the religion of Thelema. Of course, this operation is marked by its, again, ritual athleticism. It's something of a mystical marathon. However, it's also marked by just how little of the trappings of traditional ceremonial magic, you think of Solomonic magic here, are present. We don't find magical circles and sigils, really. In fact, we're told that the pentacles and the like, all the stuff that typically gets associated with magic, are just tools of the devil, and they're used to buy our souls. No long incantations and eldritch languages, for instance, are to be found. While the instructions can be highly specific, there's also a high degree of latitude required in the text. For instance, the extreme isolation that sometimes people associate with it are not really found in the original versions. For instance, the best time of the year to start the ritual is just after Pesach, but you can actually begin anytime, really. Abstinence and fasting are required during specific times, and in others, it's a good bit more lax. The ceremony can be performed indoors, but can even be performed out of doors, and you can even carry on with most day-to-day business and most times of the ritual. Of course, there are some rather specific aspects of the composition, such as the anointing oil and the incense to be used, the cleanliness of the ritual room, and the directions of the windows must face, etc. But all things told, while it has a reputation of being gruelingly difficult, it's an extremely, negotiated text in terms of its ritual accomplishment. Now, given all of this, I want to focus on a still outstanding mystery about the ritual. One of the outstanding mysteries. That is, what are the origins of the Abramelin? Now, the text gives us very little in the way of clues. It gives us a great story, but who knows if that's true. Otherwise, we just know that it emerges from the world of medieval, specifically German Jewish magic, and even that origin's, like I said, pretty murky. In this brief episode, I want to suggest that the ritual may have its origins in the Sar Torah praxis of the late classical Jewish magic. Now, I want to be clear here, I'm going to be doing a healthy dose of speculation in this episode. Now, you know that here at Esoterica, I do my utmost to limit just such personal speculation. This is not a channel where I like to speculate, it's a channel where I like to focus on the available scholarship. But I think this is a place where, one, there's just not much scholarship. And given that fact, I want to name it as speculation. I think it's informed speculation, but it's speculation nonetheless. So you can just take everything I'm going to say with a grain of salt, but if you're interested in what I have to say, stick around. That said, welcome to Speculation Corner. Now, you might want to check out my episode on the Sar Torah praxis before you dive into this one, because it's going to rely on you kind of knowing what that is. But my basic argument, as much as it is an argument, is that the best candidate to my mind for the origins of the Abramelin are probably the Sar Torah praxis, which came to be combined with the Merkava Hechelot mysticism sometime around the turn of the first millennium CE, and its uptake into the occult circles of the Hasidei Ashkenaz there in Germany in the 13th century. Why do I think that? I would suggest that the structural homologies of the ritual praxis of both are similar enough to suggest some degree of genetic relationship, though, again, this is relatively a remote and tenuous relationship. Specifically, I'd suggest that the Abramelin is possibly either an extension of the Sar Torah as it developed in a sort of remote form, or it's an actual wholesale renovation of that praxis, which had otherwise long gone extinct. I tend to lend to that one, actually. While the two remain rather different in the detail, I would argue that the underlying structural homologies are just, frankly, strikingly similar. Specifically, both rituals include a significant degree of isolation of Aramaic removal in order to optimize the ritual, in a remote room or attic in the Sar Torah literature, and a special oratory in the Abramelin. Both rituals are optimally conducted over a very specific period of the Jewish calendar, starting in Elul and going through the Yamim Noraim in the Sar Torah literature, and following Pesach onto Sukkot in the Abramelin. Both are pretty concerned with very Jewish conceptions of ritual purity involving repeated cycles of mikveh immersion, though again significantly less in the Abramelin than in the Sar Torah literature, which is positively obsessive. Both rituals are concerned with sexual purity, though again, while the Abramelin does give some allowance for sex with one's wife, the Sar Torah requires strict abstinence during the period of the entire ritual, the entire invocation of the Sar Torah. Further, both rituals make use of very specific prayers and invocations and require periods of study, something you don't see in other forms of magic. There's more study in the Abramelin, though the Sar Torah does require the study of the mysterious Sar Torah Midrash, which we don't know what that is. And of course, the whole goal of that praxis is rapid acquisition of knowledge and memory expansion. So they're all about getting into the books, which is typically Jewish. It's also worth mentioning what is saliently missing in both praxis. There is a general absence, as I mentioned earlier, of magical symbols, circles, etc. All the kind of stuff you would expect to see in Solomonic magic, you just don't see in this praxis at all. It's missing what is otherwise ubiquitous in the magical praxis of the time. The most striking homology here is that both culminate in the summoning of a powerful angelic being who provides some type of revelation to the practitioner. Of course, the nature of that revelation is significantly different between the Sar Torah and the Abramelin. One seems to be a kind of impersonal download of vast amounts of esoteric and exoteric Torah knowledge for the Sar Torah literature, the other a more personal knowledge and conversation with one's holy guardian angel to kind of crib the Abramelin. The two magical praxes are pretty unique in this respect. Now, while other magical techniques allow for specific knowledge acquisition, often through trapping a demon in a mirror or a magical circle or something and then torturing them until they tell you what you want to know, these are united in a specific angelic summoning primarily through ritual purity, asceticism, study, and prayer, where the angel bequeaths it to you rather than torturing some poor demon. Of course, another adjacent magical technology that should be mentioned at this point here is the ars notoria praxis, by which rapid knowledge of the liberal arts, along with a general improvement and broadening of one's intellectual acumen, are also increased through the use of the contemplation of various noti. These are magical signs which allow one to grasp the liberal arts very rapidly, but in later texts at least, these are often used with angelic aid. While these magical praxes share these deep structures, there is a general trend of the Sar Torah praxis to be, a bit more relaxed in its requirements compared to the Abramelin or the ars notoria for that matter, and generally reduce the extreme requirements of ritual purity, perhaps in the interests of just making them possible at all. So if the Sar Torah praxis is a possible contender for what would become the Abramelin and maybe even the ars notoria, but I think that's less likely, what is the entry point in the European context? I think the only real possibility here, and this actually increases the possibility of a connection, is that the Sar Torah rode on the coattails of the Merkaba literature as it entered into the 13th century Rhineland of Germany via the Hasidei Ashkenaz. It's in Germany. We know for certainty that many of the Merkava texts only survived to live on in a manuscript tradition and a mystical transmission as they were incorporated into the practices of this sect of the Hasidei Ashkenaz. Or just the weird Calamanus family. We don't really know if it was a big sect or not. No one really knows how large this group was. Further, as I mentioned, the Sar Torah praxis only survived as a kind of stowaway in the Merkava manuscript tradition. While the recent editors of the Abramelin text link it with the 14th century Maharil, frankly an identification that has never made any sense to me given what we know about him historically. He was a kind of boring Tosafot. I think that if we press this a bit further back into time, a century or so later, we get into the world of the German pietists, the world of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, and that makes for a much better fit for magic. I mean, that's the world of someone like Eliezer or Worms and his intense interest in magic, Merkava text. The creation of the golem. He wrote the principal commentary on Sefer Yetzirah that allows for the making of a golem. Now, that's not me saying that Abramelin flowed from the pen of Eliezer of Worms, no, but to say that it's precisely in the circle of the Hasidei Ashkenaz that we have the Torah text in Europe for the first time, in a group of people actively interested and practicing Jewish magic. Utterly unlike the Maharil a century later. I mean, he's mostly writing responses and Talmud commentaries. All in all in a German context, which, as we've seen, that's where the text is said to have its own origins. Now, that's not to say that there is a straight line from the Sar Torah praxis to the Abramelin Ritual. That's just clearly not the case, demonstrably. They're clearly not even the same ritual at the surface level. But again, there are enough deep structural homologies to, at least to my mind, to suggest some connection, which is, to my mind, again, especially salient given what's going on with the Hasidei Ashkenaz roughly around the time and area the text of the Abramelin conceives of its own origins. Why not just rewind the clock a little bit and put it among them? That's the best fit. Again, I called our little time here together Speculation Corner because the evidence here is pretty weak. It's pretty weak, and I'll gladly admit that. I'm saying it's not much, but it's not nothing. And I think that that makes much more sense than previous arguments of that it was a Mahario or just, it's a mystery, we'll never know. Now, I'm interested in tracing this out a bit more in the future when I get some time to really dive in and research this. But at this point, I just wanted to point out in a more fleshed out version from remarks I've made in passing over the couple of years that I've been making episodes about the Abramelin and Sar Torah on episodes in Esoterica. This might be, and I think it's a good candidate for the origins of the Abramelin and the Sar Torah praxis. Now, even if I'm right, does that make the Sar Torah praxis the original, authentic version of the Abramelin? No, it doesn't. Nor does it in any way invalidate the profound spiritual experiences that people have had in undergoing that precisely difficult ritual of the Abramelin. It just means that we have another piece to put into the complicated puzzle that is the history of Western ceremonial magic. And that should always serve to empower us. It should serve to empower us, from academics to practitioners, all on a path to a fuller understanding, a fuller appreciation of the undertaking of that rich magical history. That said, I do my very best to limit how much I speculate on this channel, but I hope these thoughts are, useful, interesting, given how popular and important and spiritually central it is for so many people's practice that the Abramelin is. I want to make sure to honor people's magical practices by giving, maybe a little bit small part of the puzzle for where this might have come from. And I think that chasing down a relationship between the Sar Torah praxis and the Abramelin might in fact prove to be fruitful and maybe even enlightening. That said, Speculation Corner, but again, I hope you take it for what it's worth. Until next time, thank you for watching Esoterica, where we explore the arcane in history, philosophy, and religion.